Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this triple row wraparound bracelet, and it looks like this. So I've used some agate gemstones here in the centre, and then in this case I've just added a rhinestone chain to the outside rows. So it looks like this, and then with a button closure. And this is just what I'm going to show you in this case. You can always use beads instead of the chain, but I'm just going to use the chain just to show you how you can add that as well. So if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. So these are the things that we're going to be using to make this bracelet. Now the first thing here is the cord that I'm working with, and this is just a 2mm leather cord, and I've just chosen a black colour in this case. But you can work with some other types of cord. I just do recommend that whatever cord you use, that it's quite a strong and substantial one, because it needs to be able to hold all the other materials that we're working with. And then as for the beads that I'm using these purple banded agate gemstones, and they're just regular round, so they're about 12mm in the size. Now these are just the ones that I'm using. They're a fairly large bead, but this design will work with many different sizes and shapes of beads as well. It doesn't have to be just this size and this shape. You can quite easily experiment with whatever you want to do. And then as an added feature to this design, I have here my crystal chain. And that's just going to add some bling to the piece. So this is just like a rhinestone chain. You can obviously get these in many different types. And then the thread that we need here is just something fine that we can thread through the beads and attach all the materials together. In this case I'm working with an S-lon, and it's a size D. So it comes in a little reel like this, and it's a really fine thread, almost like a sewing thread. This is just what I'm using because it's obviously also nice and strong. And you need to make sure that whatever you're using has a nice strength to make the piece very durable. And then to be able to use that thread, I have here a needle, and this is just a regular beading needle. So it's either a size 10 or a size 12, either will work really. You just got to make sure that your thread will go through the eye of the needle, and then also that obviously your needle will go through whatever beads you're using. But in this case it's not going to be a problem because the holes in these are quite large. But the technique that I'm going to be using for this bracelet will need 2 needles, so we'll need 2 of them. And then the last thing here is the button that I'm going to be using, and this is just a Shank button. So this is the back of it, and it's quite a nice size. It's about 2.3 centimeters in the diameter. You can obviously use whatever you have and that you want to use that's going to fit your design, but that's what I'm going to use for the closure of the bracelet. So get all your materials together and let's get started. So to get started with a piece, what I'm going to be working on is my macrame board here. This is just a mini one, just makes it a little bit easier to work with. And then what I'm going to do first is cut off the length of my leather cord, and in this case I'm working with about 60 centimeters, and this is going to be for basically to create the middle row of a bracelet. So it just needs to be enough to go around your wrist twice, so double up the length of going around your wrist once, and then just add a bit extra just to have extra at the ends. And then what I'm going to do is fold it over, put the ends together, find the middle here, and then where that is, just put it around in here, 2 of the slots right next to each other, and then pull so on the back the loop comes all the way, because this seems to fit the size I need for my button pretty well. But obviously you can always adjust this. This is just to secure it for now. And then on the bottom here as well, just place your cords into your slots, and then now what we can do is we need to start working with it. And then the next thing I've done is I've taken a length of my thread, so my S-lon thread here that I'm going to attach all my materials to the cord with, and it's really what you're comfortable working with. I've taken probably about 1.5 meters because I prefer, if I can, to do it in one length without having to add in. If you can't work with that much or something happens, if you run out along the way, you can always add more in. I just prefer to try and avoid that. And then I put a needle on both ends, so like this, because I like to do this technique working with 2 needles. And then what we need to start doing is getting our beads, so in this case it's my agate beads here, and attaching them so they run down the center of the little well here that we made. So they're going to sit in between the cords like this. So what I'm going to do is grab my needles and put my bead onto one first, and then don't worry about it quite being the middle yet. Then I'm going to take my needle underneath both of my lengths of leather cord here on the board, and then what I'm going to do is bring in the bead to sit, bring it underneath so it sits in between like this. And then I'm going to grab both my needles, and then just to get the cord centered roughly, bring them together, and then pull the cord so the bead basically roughly sits in the middle of the thread here. And then what we need to do is attach the first one so it sits more securely. Now what I always like to do, because this is the first one, I always like to give it a bit extra security. So I'll usually go through it a couple of times before I then move on. But what we need to do, both the lengths of thread are coming out underneath the cords. So I'm just going to go back through the bead with one side at a time, one needle at a time. But go so it loops around the cord on the outside here. So basically on top. And then pull that side all the way through. And then take the other side and through the opposite direction above the leather cord. And then pull that all the way through. So like this, and then just tighten it. And now the bead is a lot more secure in there. You can still move around, but it'll get better as we add more to it as well. And what you'll find as well, you can move it up and down your cords. So in this case I've started it a little bit down, but I want my first bead that I'm using now to actually sit way further up top there. So just push it up, and rather do this while you've only added a couple of beads before you get too far, because it can get harder to move it around once you get further down. So like that. And then what I'm going to do, because like I said, it's the first bead, I want to just go through it a couple of times. So I'm going to go back underneath and out the same side, because all I'm doing this for is I just want my thread to come out underneath the leather cord again, to then get ready to go back through the bead again. And I'm just going to do the exact same thing. Go back through, then on top of the leather cord to the other side, pull all your thread through, take the other one and do the same thing and pull all the way through like that, and tighten it. And as you can see, the bead now is already a lot more secure in there, and that's what I like to do with the first one. Go through it a couple of times before I then continue to add more beads. So you can do this a few more times if you want to. I'm probably just going to do about 1 or 2 more times, and then just until you feel like it's going to be nice and secure, because especially because it's the first one, I just like to do it for the extra security. But then we're going to then start adding in more beads. So now that I've added that first bead in place and I feel it's going to be nice and secure, I've gone through it enough times, what we need to do is add in the next one. So same principle again. Right now my threads are coming out from the side of the bead but on top of the leather cord. What I want them to do to add the next one is come below. So same principle, from the right side here, I'm just going to go underneath the right leather cord just to get it to come underneath from the bead. So like that. And it's just to get into position to add the next bead. So once we're there, what I'm going to then do is grab my one needle, doesn't matter what you start with, and then take my next bead, put that on there, and now that needle's going to go towards the opposite side, so the left one in my case. Then I grab my left needle and then go through the same bead in the opposite direction, so towards the right. So like this, and then you just pull your thread, and then when it pulls tight, your bead will sit right there in the middle of your cords, middle of your leather cord. So the exact same principle. And again, I like to always go through my beads an extra time, just to add a bit more strength and stability and durability in the long run as well. So I'm just going to go underneath again. Like I said, I do this every time on one side, do the same on the other side. So we're staying, the thread is still coming towards the same side, I'm just changing from the top of the leather cord to the bottom. So like this, I'm going to go back through the bead again. So from the right side, through the bead, coming out to the left side, and then from the left side the needle in there, through the bead, on top of the leather cord, and out towards the right. So just like that, and then tighten it. Make sure it sits all the way up against the other bead or right below it, and then that's how that's going to look. And then as you go, it's going to get kind of stronger and stronger already, and then the previous one's going to be held in place by the next one, because then the thread is going to tighten up nicely. And that's how I like to add my beads. So now you just want to keep doing the same thing, adding in more beads. You just want to get your needles in the correct position again. So back underneath the leather cord to come out the same way they were just coming out, just to change position. Like that. And then get your next bead, add it to your needles, going through in opposite directions, making sure that you tighten it along the way as well. And then I just want to point out that here, before you get too much further, is where I just want to double check my loop. So if you're working on the board here, you can just take it off, because you just want to make sure that the loop that you're making is going to be the right size for whatever you're using. If it's a button, that your button is going to be able to go through. Now I know mine can, like that, so I can put it back in. I know that the loop I create from just using these slots is going to be just the right size, but you just want to double check that, because you don't want to make the whole thing and end up finding out that it's actually the loop is too small or too large or something. So you just want to double check that now, but otherwise then continue all the way down until you reach the length that you need. So I've now continued adding my beads here down the centre until I reach the length that I need it to be. And now I've just ended on my last one here. Now before I tie anything off, what I just recommend that you do is you want to make sure that your sizing is right before you finish it off and start your next rows. And I'm just going to take it off the board here to do that, because there's a few things you just have to take into consideration. So I have the full length of the bracelet here, and then what I'm going to do is always use this loop to then use the button to close the bracelet with. So what I'm going to do is to measure it. We need to measure the full length, but not the full length from the top of the loop until the bottom down here, and where the button's going to be placed down here. The reason for that is, so the button's going to sit roughly here, and I'm going to show you at the end how to attach that. But we need to not measure from the top of the loop to the bottom of the button here, because that's going to be too long. Because remember that this button is going to sit inside the loop, so it's actually going to be sitting up here. So technically we only need to measure from the top of the loop and then down to the bottom of the last bead approximately. So that's what you want to measure. And also another thing is, depending on the beads that you're using, because these are quite large beads, so it kind of bulks out the depth of the bracelet quite a bit compared to if you were using something flatter or smaller. Because of this, when you then take it around to form the bracelet, it's going to actually have a smaller circumference, or it's going to fit a smaller wrist than just measuring the length of it. So you need to take that into account as well. So if you're using large beads like this, maybe add an extra inch or so to the bracelet. Again, just you can always take it off when you feel like you have enough in this first row, and just gently wrap it around your wrist before you completely tie off your thread. So that's just what you want to do now. Make sure the sizing is right before we then tie these threads off. So the way that I'm going to tie these threads off is I'm just going to use one needle at a time, to do one side at a time, because obviously they're coming out on each their own side, and we have two ends we need to get rid of. Because what I'm going to do is start a new thread when we start the next row. So I'm just going to basically tie a few knots around here. So right now it's coming out towards on top of the leather. That doesn't really matter whether it's on the top or the bottom, because what I'm going to then do is go around the leather, just this one side. So you just want to go around the opposite way from where it is. So in my case, it's coming out on top of the leather, so I'm going to round the bottom. So then on this side I have this little loop then, and then I'm going to go back through that. So what you're creating, it's basically like a half hitch if you know macrame, but it's a little knot there on this side. And then you want to tighten that. Make sure then when you tighten this that it's all the rest of the thread that you used up here, that it doesn't go loose. Just make sure it's still nice and tight. And then I'm going to do that again, because one isn't quite enough. You need to do it a couple of times. Again through the loop, and then tighten that. And then before I finish off one side, I like to go to the other side as well, just because I don't want too much loose thread here while I'm working with it. It's just to ensure basically that everything stays nice and tight. So same thing, go around the leather on this side to make a loop, and then go through the loop and tighten it. Do it again. Back through the loop. Always making sure you make a knot, because that's the purpose now, so we can get rid of the ends. So that's 2 on each side now. Now what I like to do is then basically go back through the bead again. So get our threads onto the opposite sides with both sides here. And then do the same thing again. And this is just going to add extra security to it, so it's not just knots on one side, because say if one of them breaks, then kind of the whole thing will come apart. So if we do this again, I'm coming out on top again, go back around your leather cord to go back through the loop, tighten, do it again, again just twice or something. Doesn't really matter how many times, whatever you feel is going to be nice and secure on yours. Same on the other side here. Make your knots. And then back through the loop. So now we've made 2 knots with each, gone through the bead, and then made another 2 knots on the other side. And then what I like to do is, because I still don't feel like if you just cut them off now, I still don't feel that's going to be quite secure enough in the long run. So what I like to do is use a bit of glue, and this is just the GS Hypo Cement, and I like using this because it dries clear, so you won't be able to see it, because obviously it might be visible otherwise, but also it has a really fine tip to it, so applicator tip. So what I'm going to do is just get the glue, so I can get the glue right where I want it to go, and I'm just going to basically put it on just on where I made those knots, so right on top where we made all the knots, just a little bit. It doesn't need to be too much, it's just enough to give it a little bit extra security and hold all the thread in place and the knots basically. So just a little bit on each side here. Don't do too much because we don't need too much, it's just going to become more visible if you put too much glue on there. So like that, and then put your glue away. And then what I just like to do is the one last thing before the glue dries is actually just go around and do another 1 or 2 knots, because then when you do those, they're going to kind of, the glue's going to be in between the knots instead of just sitting on top, and I just feel it's going to give it extra security. So literally just again a couple of times, just so the knots really get worked in with the glue. So it's going to make it even more durable. So obviously after all this you don't want your piece to come undone, especially not while you're wearing it. So again, another 2 knots here just on each side. Again, just make whatever you feel comfortable with, and because the thread is so fine you don't have to worry so much about making this amount of knots, because it's not going to get really bulky or that, because the thread is really fine. So just like this, make sure they're nice and tight, and then you just want to leave this to dry for a bit until the glue is dry enough so you can then cut off the excess. So now that the glue is dried a bit, I'm just going to get my scissor and then go in and cut off the excess thread here, just as close as I can get without cutting into any of the knots here, because we obviously don't want it to come undone. So like that. And then this is the first row of beads down the centre of your bracelet. So now what we need to do is start the next row. Now for this, I'm actually not going to cut off a piece of leather first. What I'm going to do is kind of work off the reel, because it's just easy and you have less waste at the end. because you're just working on one side first and working your way around and coming down to this side. So that's why I'm just going to work with it off the reel, leave it on there, but then just get myself a bit of length. I'm just going to attach that to my macrame board as well, just in the slot next to the other one here. I'm just going to start on this side, doesn't matter what side you start on, and then on the top also just in the slot next to it. And I'm just going to leave it a little bit looser, so not pull it really tight, because obviously when you're looking at this, the slot, it's just if you use the macrame board really, the slot is a bit wider than say the chain that I'm using here to lie like this, so I just want to have that little bit of slack to pull it through in towards the chain so it lies flush next to that. So that's what we need to start attaching now. Now to attach this chain, what I've done is I've got another length of my thread ready, so just the same one that I used in the beginning, and in this case I'm working with about 2 meters of it, and I've just threaded on a needle onto each end and just doubled them over for now, so the long length has gotten a bit shorter to work with until we use it up as we go. And also what I've just done with mine, because I threaded on the 2 needles here on each end, one on each end, what I've just done is the tails coming through the needles, I've just kind of pulled them quite far down to begin with here, as you can see. So they come quite far down, so at the beginning we have a shorter length to work with as possible really. So that's just one little tip that might make it a little bit easier. And also just make sure that your needles are roughly at the same place on your thread, so that we're going to be working about from the middle when we start here, just so you have roughly an even length on each needle as we go throughout. So to start off here, is the very first pattern is going to be the most fiddly, because obviously it's a chain here and it moves quite a bit just as it wants to really. So the first part is just going to be a little bit fiddly, but it's going to get easier once we get the first part attached. So what I'm going to do is I'll just have my chain line here ready for me to bring it in. And then just to begin with, I'm just going to get a bit of thread ready here before I then bring in the chain, so the first link. So I'm just going to take one needle, get it underneath both of these cords, and we're just focusing on these 2 outer ones now. So kind of try and ignore the rest of it here. We just sometimes have to go in between the beads and that. But just focus on these 2 cords, and then I'm just going to bring this so about the middle is down here. You can still adjust that when we tighten the whole thing. And then what we need to do is kind of create a little place where we can fasten the first part of our chain. So what we need to do basically throughout, how we're going to fasten the chain is go between each of the links here with the thread, and also behind obviously, otherwise it's going to fall through the back. So that's what we want to do. So what I'm going to do is then go back, just start with one side at a time, go back around, so around the top and then down in between, up the other side, so like this. So we'll come underneath both of them, and then we'll go around the top again, or just one of them, and down through the middle. And I'm going to do the same with the other side, just like this. And then just pull them all the way through. And like I said, the first part here is just going to be the most fiddly part. And then you have your thread crossing like this. And you can see you can pull your cords together a little bit. And because again this is the beginning, what I just want to do is do this a few times. So again I'm going to get my thread here, and I like to then, this is in this case coming out right at the top of the other ones. So I'm just going to come down around the bottom, because a bit of intertwining and interweaving just adds to the strength of it. And then back out to the other side. And the same with the other side again. So like this, we're just getting it ready. It looks a bit messy now, but it's just until we get the whole thing going. So as you can see, you have a bit more crossing over now. So now then, if I were to bring down my chain, so just grab the very first link. What I want to do is make sure that that link goes in between. So right now we have one thread coming across the bottom underneath both of the cords, the leather cords that we're using. So we want the link, the chain, to go in between that and then all the ones on the top that you crossed over. Like this. And then if you were to pull it, make sure you pull it so they all sit in between the first two links there. You pull it tight and then it's going to sit like this. Now what I just want to do, I want to kind of secure it just a little bit more, but I'm just going to leave the chain in there. You can always push it down a bit just to make sure it stays in place, because we can pull it up and down as we tighten it. And then I just want to go behind again as well, because right now there's only one thread across the back of the chain, and I just want to do a couple more. So I'm going to again come around the top of this outside cord, but then go around behind the chain with it, with the thread, like that. Doesn't have to be perfect just yet. We're still just getting everything into position until we can start kind of fastening it into place. Same thing around the outside one, behind the chain, and then underneath the outside cord on the opposite side. So like that. So now we're going to be about good to go. You can always do a few more if you feel you want to. There's no harm in that, it's just going to add extra security. Now you might just get a little bit tangled, some of your threads, so just take your time, separate them out, pull your chain where you want it to sit, so your cords, or your threads rather, go in between the first two links. So that's what we want. So like I said, it's just going to be a little bit fiddly, just until we get it going. So just like this. Now that's going to sit quite nicely like this, and I feel this is actually going to be quite nice and secure. Obviously it's still going to, when you let this go, it might still come a bit loose as you're working with it. But as we move up and we're going to do more and more, this is going to then stay tight. So it's going to get a lot easier to work with. So what I'm going to do now is move on to the next link. And remember what we need to do as well throughout is we need to go behind the chain, because obviously there needs something on both sides to support it, otherwise it'll just fall through. So I'm just going to do that first. So again, I just take one side at a time, start from the right side, it's coming out underneath the outside cord here. I go up and around the top of that cord and then come down in between, but I'm going to then go behind the chain. So just lift it up and go behind. And then in this case you just want to be aware of where you're at, because what I want, this is a little bit far down for where I want it to start. So you just push it up a bit, like that. It's going to sit nicer there. And then you just want to make sure this, in this case and throughout, to find out where the cord is gonna, the thread rather, is going to be coming out. So in this case I'm actually going to need to come up between the two first beads there. So I'll go down in between, behind the chain, and out in between the beads on the other side. And just pull that. And then we need the other needle. Basically do the same thing. So we're coming around the cord, go down between, behind the chain, and out to the other side. So just like this, pull it all the way through, and then you'll find that your cord or thread is going to sit. So we're ready to go in between the next two links there and tighten there. And just, it's still going to be just a little bit loose like I said, but just take your time. In this case I want to go in between those two links. So again I'm going to do the same principle we're always doing, coming around the outside, going down in between, around, down in between on both sides. But we're just alternating if we're going in front and behind the chain. So I just went behind, now I want to go in front because I want to support the front as well. So just go down roughly where that chain is, the link is that you want to go in between, and pull it through. And don't pull it tight just yet, it's easier doing that once we have all the threads in place. Go around with the other side and pull it through. And then when you pull it tight, you probably just want to push your cords down, because as we're working with them, so you make sure that the chain sits in between the cord. Make sure your thread doesn't get caught on your stones in the chain, or the prongs rather, like that. And then you're ready basically for the next link. Now I'll probably just go, since we're still at the beginning, I might do this throughout, it's really up to you how much you want to secure each link, but I'll probably just go around one more time. Whether you want to do it on the back or the front or both as well, that's completely up to you. But at least at the beginning I would just do a couple of times in the first few links, just so we can get a proper nice security in there. Like that. And the other side. Pull it all the way through, and then when you tighten, use your needles as tools to make sure that your thread goes where you want it to go, like that. And then pull that tight. And then you just want to make sure before you move too much further that everything sits how you want it to sit. Are you happy where it starts? Otherwise you can just move it now. You're better off doing that now before you get too much further. So in other words, you just continue like this, move on to the next link. So now we'll move on to the next spacing in between the links. So I want to go behind, remember that. So I take my needle from the outside and then behind the chain, up on the other side. So just remember that when you change to the next link, just go behind the chain, around and behind and out, just like this. And then your thread is going to be in position. We're ready to do the next space in between the links, and you just want to keep doing the same thing. Make sure that your chain sits kind of in a little well between the two cords there. So keep doing this, moving all the way around the bracelet. Also when you get to the top, up here, because this is where the loop is going to be obviously, and here we have that hole from the original beads that we did here. We just left a space, and that's going to be the loop part. You just want to do exactly the same thing, move around that loop. Up here you just have the cords, you're not going to have any beads in the way. So just move around that, come down the other side, down back to the very other side of the beginning here, and then we just need to finish it off. So I've now kept going and attaching my chain all the way around, and I reached the other side here, gone around the loop as well, the exact same way. So what I just want to do is show you how to add in some new thread if you need to, because chances are, at least on the outside row here, that you will have to do that, because otherwise it's a lot of thread to work with. So this is where I've gotten to on mine, and as you can see, the rest here isn't attached yet, and I'm running short on my thread, and I just want to kind of tie this off before I run out completely, and then add in a new thread. So the way that I'm going to do that is I've currently just kind of attached that last link in place, that right there. So I'm just going to work around there to then finish off these ends. So I start with one side at a time. So I just start with my right one first, the outside one, it doesn't matter. And then I go around that same cord where it's coming out from underneath the leather cord on this side. I'm going around it, and then what I'm going to do is come through it, that little loop, before you tighten it completely. And I've gone through it twice to make kind of a knot. And then when you tighten it, you're tightening that knot around the leather cord on the side here. And then just tighten it as best you can for now. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So this is coming out from underneath the leather cord on the inside of the chain here, and coming up on the outside. So I'm going to go back around again, up through the middle with the bracelet, and then in that loop before you pull it, I'm just going to go through this twice as well, and then pull it tight like that. So both sides are nice and tight. And now what I'm going to do is we have these two then with one knot on each side. So I'm going to actually have them come across the middle, so across the chain. So like this, I take my right one above the other one, and then what I'm going to do is tie a knot. So just kind of keep your threads separated, so like this. So I'm just going to use the needle to go around the other one, the other thread. I'm going to do that twice as well, and then when I pull it, that knot is going to get pulled to sit right in between that very last link you reached anyway. So sit right in there, and then to secure it extra, I'm just going to do another one on top of that, but what I'm going to do is then do the opposite. So that means to take my left one on top and then go around twice. And then we have another knot, the same thing, just the other way around, and then tighten that down. And then you have a little knot sat right there in the middle across the chain, but because we're using the thread, it's such a fine thread and we're already kind of weaving there, it's going to just blend in, so you won't be able to notice it or anything. So now what you can do, it depends on how happy you are security wise, you can leave it at that, or you can go around once more. So again, make your loop and then go through it twice to make your knot on this outside one first, and then do the same on the other side. So we're just repeating the exact same thing if you want to give it just a little bit extra security. That's completely up to you. You could also just do the one if you're happy with that. And I'm also just going to give it a little bit extra security by adding some glue to it, because obviously if it's just a knot, it's going to be a little bit easier to come undone. And then again across the middle, I want to make sure I finish this off by going across the middle, because that's the most secure knot of them compared to the side ones, like that. And then the opposite way, and just get hold of it there. And then tighten again across the middle. And now that is nice and secure. So now this is just where I want to add in a bit of glue. And in this case I'm using the GS Hypo Cement because it dries clear. So again, because this is on the front, you don't want to be able to see it really, so you want it to just blend in. So it dries clear, and also you have this little tip to it. Makes it a lot easier to distribute the glue just where you want it to go, because obviously this is quite a fine little space and I want the glue just to go in between them links of the chain onto the knot. And it's just a little bit, you don't need to oversaturate it too much. Just a little bit of glue there, just to secure that knot in place. So we can then cut off the excess thread and it's going to hold nicely. So just until you know there's a bit of glue on the knot, and then you just want to leave that to dry, and then we can cut off the excess. So I've now let the glue dry a bit, and then I'm going to get out my scissor and then just go in and cut off the excess thread here. So I just hold it up in between and then cut it off, just to get it as far down as possible. So like this. And then when you keep going here, you won't actually be able to see the join in any way, because actually down here I've already done it once because I ran out of thread. So I have a join down here, but you can't actually see it very obviously unless you really look close. So it does really do blend in. So then to add on a new piece of thread, I've just threaded on a length again, so whatever you're comfortable working with, onto my 2 needles, same way as the other times. And then I just want to start adding, and basically start out the same way, so we then just continue adding the chain. What I just want to do is I don't want to start on the in between the very next link. I just want to go back to the very last one and just do it on there first to kind of attach the thread before we start on the next link. And I just do that by just going around the leather cord, down behind the back first, and then around the leather cord, just kind of as if we were doing another link, but just around this last one first, so it just gets secured in place. Same with the other side. So once we've done this, basically, it's just going to be like continuing, like we're still just working with one long length of thread, except we just added it in. And just put your needles together just to try and get it roughly about the middle, and then you tighten that, and it's just going to go around that very last length that you did. And then now you just want to then continue the exact same steps by moving to the next link. So this is just the same way. Go around your leather cord, and remember the first time you go behind the chain with one side first, and then the other one. Go behind the chain so we can get that support on the back of the chain as well. Otherwise it'll just fall through. And then we're ready to do the next link. The exact same way, crossing over now, going in front a few times. So this is just what you want to do if you need to add in some more thread, which chances are you probably will do. And just continue this all the way to the end till you reach about the same place down here as where your chain started on the other side. So now that I've reached the end here with my chain, so both sides are pretty level, so I know that last link is going to be the same place as the other one, the other side. I'm going to get my cutters here and then go in and cut off the remaining of my chain, just so I have that one link left where we tied it off on the other side here. So I'm going to cut this off, and there we have the chain attached. So it looks like this. So now that we know we've come all the way across here, we know how much length that we've needed to use because we're finished, then what I'm just going to do as well is cut off the excess of my leather cord here. So just the one that's still attached to the reel, just cut it off at about the same length as the other ones. Just like that. And there we then have the main part of the bracelet finished, and you have that loop up here. So what there's left to do now is finish off this end. So to finish off the end here, what I'm going to do is just some simple square knots with the leftover cord that we have here. And that's why we don't need to have loads length left, just enough to do a couple of square knots with. And then what I'm going to do, the two middle ones here, I'm going to keep together as kind of the holding cords. And then the two outside ones, one from each side, I'm going to bring across and make my first square knot just to kind of bring it all together before I add in my button. So bring one side over and the other one over that and behind the middle ones and up through the loop. If you're a bit unsure of how to do square knots, I do have a video on how to do basic macrame knots that might be helpful. I'll put a link to that in the description box. But then that's one side, and then the other side of the square knot, go the opposite way, go over and over that one, behind and up through the loop. Make sure that your cords in the middle there are lying kind of next to each other rather than overlapping. And then just pull that tight. And with this being 2mm leather cord, obviously it's quite substantial cord, so you're not going to get your knots really tight, but just do them as much as you can. And then now I'm going to bring in my bead here, or my button, sorry, and then put this on the two middle ones, so the two leather cords in the middle there that were the holding ones, the holding cords. So like this, it just fits. And then push it all the way up. And now what you just want to do is make sure that you put the button on the right way, because obviously this is the front of the bracelet, so you want the button to be facing upward to that. So push it all the way up like that, and you can always go to the back here because you don't have the button in the way to do the last knot here. So we're just going to do another square knot to kind of cage in this button. So one goes over, the other one goes over that, behind, and then through the loop. And then as you tighten it, you can see that's going to tighten right on the other side of that button. And then the other half of the square knot. And you can see the ends are getting shorter now. That's why we just need enough to do these couple of square knots. So like that. And then because this leather cord is going to not be completely tight straight away, you just need to pull it a little bit. And then what we need to do as well, because you can't just cut these off and expect it to last because it's leather cord, it will come undone. So what I'm going to do is use glue as well to just finish off that last square knot so we can then go in and cut off the excess. So the glue that I'm going to use is just this GS Hyper Cement, and you can use other glues like E6000 would be great as well. The main reason that I'm using this is because it has a fine nozzle tip to it, so I'll really be able to get the glue right in where I want it to go and just fill up the space there. Because what I want to do is basically, if you're looking on your knot, you have a square knot. One full square knot, you'll find you have a little well in between the two halves, and that's basically where I want most of the glue to go, because you want to fill that up so you kind of bond the two sides together and all the cords as well. So I'm just going to fill this up and also go around where my excess cord is coming out on the other side as well. So just around there, and I like to go on the ends as well, so just here. But mainly you want to focus on the well, make sure you get that filled up. And what you can also do if you can get in there is put a little bit of glue on the other side here, just on the inside of the button. Obviously try and make sure you don't glue it fastened to the button, so when you let it dry just make sure they're separated. But this is just where you want to put the glue. So fill this up nicely, and then you want to leave it to dry. And then also what I just do a couple of times while it's drying, I just pull this a bit to make sure that the knot stays in place. So leave it for a couple of minutes, pull it a bit, maybe leave it a couple of minutes more, and then pull it, and then it should be fine, and then hold itself in place. So leave this to dry. So now that I let it dry here, what I'm going to do is just get my scissors and then go in and cut off the excess. Just do one at a time, and I just want to try and get as close to the knot as possible, like that. And because you have that glue there, it's going to kind of hold it in place. Otherwise, if you didn't have the glue, this would come undone, because the leather doesn't, because it's so thick material, you need that little bit extra security. And then also the end ones here, like that. And that's all the excess gotten rid of. So that end is finished off now, and it's hidden there nicely behind the button, so when you wear it you won't be able to see that at all. And then this is basically a finished bracelet, and it's now going to be ready to wear. So you just take the button and then use that loop that we made, and then that's how you're going to fasten it. So just get it through. Now obviously just remember you need to make the loop the correct size. I like it to be just a little bit tight, not so tight you can't get it through, but just tight enough so the loop, you don't want it to be too big either. But then this is your finished bracelet. Then either you can have this at the front, just how the bracelet looks itself, or even the button as well looks quite nice, so that could quite easily be sitting at the front as well and be a bit of a feature. But then this is the bracelet, a nice, pretty simple 3-stranded bracelet, 3-row bracelet. Now this is just the design that I chose to make in this case and in this tutorial, but you can obviously mix it up and use different types of material, and depending how you want it to look as well. So for instance, I used a coloured thread to attach all my beads and my chain on. You could also use something like this, some clear thread, some monofilament or something, and that will give you a much more clear look to it, so the thread wouldn't really be a feature in the piece. But that's completely up to you. Also in this case I used the center row was beads, and then I put the chain on there. You could also just make another row of beads instead of adding the chain in. So that just means instead of adding the chain like I showed you, you'd just be adding in beads the way that I showed you in the original one. And I made one previously. This is a 5-row bracelet, and the exact same principle. It looks like this, and I just added the center rows the same way, and then I just added another 2 rows on each side to create the width of it, so it ends up being 5 rows wide this. And I have another video on how to do this if you're interested in having a look at that. I'm going to put a link of that to the description box. But that's completely up to you how you want to make yours. You can mix them up as you want. You can add the chain into this one, or you can add just beads into this one instead. Make it 3 or 5 rows. It's completely what you feel comfortable with. But otherwise, this is how you make this bracelet, and you add this rhinestone chain into it. And like I said, you can mix it up and do your own exactly how you want it to look, design wise. But it looks like this. So I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this beaded vertical lax head knot bracelet, and it looks like this. So this is using the vertical lax head knot with cord, and I've just added beads to it to give a different effect and different colours as well. And on this one I've just done a button closure, but you can obviously do whatever you want. You could use ribbon ends if you want to in place. But this is the bracelet. So if you want to learn how to make this,